I always give Courtney the sermon title, and then she comes up with these things that I have no idea what's going to be there. So that's perfect. Don't lose your goat. So I was watching, it's Stephen Colbert, right? I couldn't remember his first name, who does the talk show. And he was doing a show this week, and I mean, he usually has a huge audience, and he was sitting in what looked to be his den by himself with obviously some kind of technical person. And he was telling all his jokes, but there was no laughter. And he kept working through the punchlines of these jokes, but it kind of looked like he was crying. And I thought, I think he's feeling an immense sadness that he's not getting any feedback. And I thought maybe some of these guys maybe would put on a laugh track or something, but he's not doing that. He's just braving it through. And I thought, I know that's hard to do. It's difficult to do because he feels he has a message. I mean, he's not just a comedian. He does political commentary. And I mean, he had some good stuff that night. But he's continuing on to do it with no feedback. And so, for instance, when I wear this jacket once a year at Easter, I expect feedback, and I don't get any here. Well, other than Mike had never seen it before. He thought it was pretty funny. So, and I know now my mother is rolling her eyes at home. And also, I noticed online I got 1 thumbs down a couple of weeks ago. So if I get another thumbs down, I'm going to guess it's because of the jacket. So I just want to say that one of the ways that I have always gotten through hard times is with a sense of humor. And so my humor doesn't always match other people's humor. Usually I can tell on Sunday mornings. It's a little more difficult now. But I appreciate my friends and colleagues who are here this morning to help put the service on. At least I get this much feedback, which is helpful. So, with that in mind, this next image has really nothing to do with the sermon whatsoever. I just thought it was really funny. And in Christianity, we're allowed to do this. So, this is the empty tomb. I'm assuming the woman in the blue is Mary, because she's outside the empty tomb. The people outside are running around yelling, "He is risen." She's looking in the tomb. The linen cloths are on the ground. And she said, "Oh, how many times have I told him not to leave his clothes on the floor?" I think that's funny. I don't know how you guys feel. Exactly, right? So I'll probably get thumbs down for that one too. But anyway, I think it's funny. So, Easter symbols. I picked this one out here because I thought it was this is from a Vacation Bible School slide that I saw online, teaching children about Easter. So, it's got some nice images here. We have the tomb. We have the light inside. We have the domed arch over there. We have a cross up in the background. And we have one of the symbols that we sometimes talk about at Easter, not very often because it's associated with a kind of a pagan symbolism, which are butterflies, right? And butterflies have often been used in Christianity and in other pagan cultures to speak about transformation. The idea that one living creature enters into a state of kind of comatose, some people would call death, and that creature emerges from that state of being wrapped up and becomes a beautiful new creature which bears no relation to the old creature. So butterflies have often been used in cultures as that kind of symbol of resurrection, renewal, transcendence, if you will. So for children, you try to explain that image in kind of concrete terms, right? The question for Christians often becomes at Easter, what does the empty tomb mean for me? And again, the visuals of Easter are quite clear, right? You always have the cross or several crosses in the background. You have the rising sun. You have the opening of the cave, the stone. We never hear who rolled the stone away, but the stone is removed, and the tomb is empty, which is supposed to tell us, of course, that Jesus has risen, physically risen, and walked away and left the clothes. It's interesting in all 4 Gospels, and I'll talk about this in a minute too, the conclusions are different in every Gospel. They're not the same. The story doesn't end the same. The only thing that's current and common in the Gospels is that Jesus is marched into trial, that he's convicted, that he's led to crucifixion, and that he's crucified. And after that, the story is varied and different in each of the Gospels. So, again, back on my horse theme. So I was driving up to Gravenhurst I think it was on Good Friday or last Sunday. So I'm driving by one of the farms I go by, and I'm always looking at the animals. There's some geese and some swans, and some of the ducks have arrived. And I drive by one of the farms. This is not one. I had to look this up on the internet because I didn't have my camera with me. And there is a horse, a very big horse, and a little goat standing face to face. And it's kind of a nasty kind of a day, but it's warm. And as I drove by, I had this funny thought. I thought they looked like they were saying to each other, so what are we going to do today? Right? Are we going to chase each other around? Are we just going to eat? Are we going to enjoy the warm weather? It was like literally they looked like they were locked in some kind of conversation. And then I started thinking about the relationship between horses and goats. Now, I don't know if you know about the relationship between horses and goats, but there is a fascinating relationship. When horses were bred to race, especially for money, one of the problems with them was because they kept getting moved around and put in different stalls and barns that weren't comfortable, especially across the U.S. in the early 20s and 30s. The thoroughbreds, which are highly selectively bred, are very neurotic and jittery. Right? Because they're bred to run. That's all. They're bred to be turned on, run around a track, and shut off again. They're not bred for social manners or anything. So somebody discovered that if you put a goat in with a thoroughbred in its little pen, it calms the horse down. So owners started to get goats, and this is what they'll do. You go on the internet, there are a ton of pictures of this. Horses and goats. The goats will get on top of them, they'll walk with them, the horses will follow them around, they'll lick, they'll lay in around each other. It calms these thoroughbreds right down. So I don't know if you knew this, but this is where that expression came from. Don't let anyone get your goat. Because what happened was, when this tradition started, competitors of very highly trained, successful horses would sneak in the night before the race and steal the goat. Right? So the expression, don't let them get your goat, came from horse racing, and they would steal the goat as close to the race as they could so that the horse would start getting agitated. By the time it was time to race, the horse was useless because all it was looking for was its companion. So this ridiculous expression of don't let anyone get your goat, it doesn't mean to get you angry. It means that somebody's taken your comfort. Somebody's taken something that calms you down. And this became a kind of an epidemic where they would put guards on the goat so that nobody would steal the goat. And in some ways, the goat started to become more worthwhile than the horse. Because the horse wouldn't take well to a new goat. You couldn't just replace the goat. Because, like all animals, they're very attuned to sense of smell. So they understood, this is my goat. I don't want another goat. I want my goat. And so I began to think about that in terms of Easter. So today is Easter. What does it mean? It's a time of renewal for each and everything. I mean, we use all the symbols for Easter, right? They're all renewal kind of symbols. We use eggs, right? We use Easter bunnies. We use cookies. Yes, we have some Easter cookies up in the front here. We paint eggs. We haul them out. We do all the kinds of things, flowers, tulips. We have all kinds of lilies, all kinds of things we use that are regenerative, that something has died, something has gone dormant, and it becomes new again. But one of the things about Easter, of course, is what does it mean to you? Now, I thought about this, and I know in some ways I wanted to be light today instead of dark, so I thought we'd look at it in a kind of positive way. So what is going to get your goat? What's going to stop your happy place over this Easter? Obviously, COVID-19 is going to get your goat, right? It's going to, we are feeling it, as I'm sure all your families are feeling it. I usually see my grandkids at Easter. It's one of the times we get together because it's warm enough to be outside and we go in the boat or we go make a fire or we do something. We're not going to do that this year. We usually sit with the family and have a big meal, eat too much and drink too much. We're not going to do that this year. You know what our entertainment was this weekend for Easter? One of our neighbors on the street cut down a big tree with one of those lifts. So all of us on the street went out in our lawn chairs and sat and watched him cut down a big tree. You got to be pretty hard off when that's your day's entertainment. And that was the big event on the street, not that and somebody drove by in a van with a bunny costume on. I don't even want to know what that was all about, honking their horn. But that was the big event. So, I mean, the illness in itself, aside from how it does damage, the part of keeping us apart damages our Easter. And we tend to put a lot of import into those kind of holidays. Aging. Sometimes at this time of the year, because spring is here, we may not feel so spring-like. And I know some folks who've been in isolation during the winter in particular and may feel that this spring they're not as spring-like as they were last spring. And this may feel like maybe it's more than a year. And they may not feel, especially with all the isolation and the lack of exercise, this may be tougher this year. And so to think about that and be preoccupied with that is, again, a way of kind of taking away your inner joy. Social isolation is always difficult. And it's more difficult for some people than it is for other people. And I think we're going to find out in the days ahead, it has repercussions. I mean, I found out this week that my wife would be working at home. Now, I don't know how you people feel about that. Not my wife's working at home with me, but if you are at home and your wife comes home and works with you. Yeah, and I've got, I'll appreciate your feedback. I wasn't particularly enthused about the idea. Seriously. So, I mean, if I feel that way, and we get along reasonably well most of the time, because we work an hour in each direction away from each other, I think of all the people who have been forced to be home at the same time and have never had that experience before, and have children at home. And all of a sudden, these lives of separation and hurry are all shut down. And they're in the same place at the same time all the time. I know that creates stress. I know that makes life difficult. And yet all of us, when we had children, we think, oh, if I only had more time to spend with my children. If I only had more time to spend at home. And then all of a sudden that happens, you're like, wait, what was I thinking? This is tough. This is not good. I mean, I had to make sure Colleen had proper headphones. So I had to stop listening to her conversations with people at work on speakerphone. You can't sleep through that, folks. You can't. It's really noisy. So I know, it's tough. And lacking a sense of purpose, I think that's why yesterday it was really funny to watch everybody, because I'm looking out the window, and I got lots of projects to do, and I slowly saw all the neighbors sort of one by one kind of come up to the street while this guy's cutting his tree down. And some of them are neighbors that don't particularly talk to each other all the time. And they were all pretty good at social distancing, they're all sort of yelling back and forth, because of course there's a chainsaw going and the motor of this lift at the same time. So everybody's yelling, right? And everybody wants to laugh and joke, and I thought it's that sense of purpose. All of a sudden they're part of something. Right? Because they're sitting at home feeling like I'm not really part of anything. And it was great for my neighbor, because what they started to do was when branches come down, they went off and picked them up and put them in the trailer. So he got free labor for the whole afternoon. But this lacking a sense of purpose, I think sometimes we're not aware that all the things we do in our lives give us purpose. And even if we complain about them, the driving and the work and all the stuff and all the tension and responsibility, take that all away all of a sudden, and we really have to sort out what we're doing. And it has an effect on people. I know that. So Easter and spring. Doesn't that just make you feel good? Just all on its own. Huh? Shouldn't you have that as your screensaver? Now, bunnies are interesting because bunnies were one of the pagan symbols in the Roman Empire. And it was also a sign of resurrection. So sometimes Christianity has a little bit of, the whole Easter bunnies laying eggs. Those were two symbols from the Roman Empire. And lots of time in church we have a hard time with that. But you can't fight it, right? I mean, that whole Cadbury commercial where there's the Easter bunny laying chocolate, like that makes no sense. Seriously, I'm not the only one who feels that way. I can't be, right? But that goes right back to Roman times and maybe before, because they're both symbols of fertility. And spring is a fertile time. I know the bunnies are busy in my backyard. I don't know what they're doing in yours, but man, oh man, they are busy in my yard. And again, you have tulips and little, it's not a chickadee, it is a nuthatch in the corner on the right. Is that right? I think it's a nuthatch. Please give me feedback about the bird in the corner. And butterfly. Trees in the background, clouds, sun, sprouts coming up from the ground. Winter has gone, spring has come, right? Life is abundant. So I thought a couple more things here for you folks that I thought would be interesting. The mystery of human existence lies not just in staying alive, but in finding something to live for. That's Dostoevsky, by the way, if you can't read that. I took a course in Russian literature. I don't remember very much about it. It was in university. And this, for me, is really interesting around in the New Age story of Easter. It's not the literal belief in the story that's important. It's being personally a part of the story that's crucial. Are we a part of the Easter story? Does it mean anything to us? Does the empty tomb have any impact on our lives at all? Is it a metaphor? Is it a symbol? Is it allegory? Or is it some kind of realized belief that life has a cycle that turns over and turns over? And that out of death and despair and destruction, there is new life which surfaces. And in the midst of that, even sometimes, new life surfaces. So I wanted to put this image up because it's one of my favorite ones. You can understand why. The image in one of the Gospels, all the Gospels end differently. They've got Jesus coming down from the clouds. They've got him in a different body. They've got him with one disciple, two disciples. 3 women show up. 1 woman shows up. He comes, he goes, he walks through walls. If you're bored this afternoon and you got nothing to do, read the last 3 chapters of each of the 4 Gospels and try and make them fit together. You won't be able to. There's all kinds of stories. But my favorite story is this one. It's when one of the reappeared stories, when the disciples are kind of fed up and they don't know what's going on, so they go back to their old ways. They go fishing. So they're out in the lake fishing, and they look to the shore, and there's Jesus sitting cooking fish. To me, it's one of the most pastoral. It's not magical. He's not coming out of the clouds. He didn't walk through the walls. He's just sitting there cooking fish. And it's early in the morning, and he waves them over. We suppose, you can see in this picture, it's great. He's pointing. I got breakfast over here, folks. Right? And if anybody's ever been out fishing in the morning, cooking fish in the morning is a great thing. So you can just imagine he summons them back, and they sit, and they have breakfast. And they eat fish together, and all the craziness of whatever happened in the last couple of weeks beforehand is past. And they're just friends sitting and eating. And I think the gospel writer who wrote that passage, again, whether it's literal, whether it's true, whether it happened in that manner, whether it didn't happen, whether it happened before or after, the idea that was Jesus saying life goes back to normal. That after all of this craziness and all that you've learned, we still go back to fishing, we still go back to farming, we go back to school, we go back to church, we live our lives, we're changed because we're stronger, we're better, we're more able to cope, we're closer, and I'd like to think in some ways we're nicer. Because when you're social distancing, you have to be a lot nicer to people. It's a lot harder to hold open the door, isn't it? Right? I've seen people do it with their legs outstretched and their elbows behind their back, but they're still doing it. Right? We are different people after we go through trauma. I like to think we're better people. And that lovely little story of Jesus cooking fish for his friends, waiting for them to come back in and just saying, it's okay. Things are going to go on. Things are going to be good. And I had to leave you with another schmaltzy picture here because I couldn't resist it. Don't you want that as a screensaver too? I mean, seriously. Who doesn't love jumping little goats? So I just wanted to leave it in. Don't let this get your goat. Don't let this virus be the thing that turns you into a person you don't want to be. Don't give up hope. Don't let socialization keep you away from other people in the ways that you can still communicate. I have had more contact with people that I haven't talked to in 20 and 30 years than I have in 20 or 30 years because of the virus. So it's not that kind of isolation. So don't let it get your goat. Don't let that little goat that jumps around inside you and gives you peace, don't let it do anything to that. Be at peace this year. Amen.